Hey everyone, you're listening to the Daydreamers podcast, and my name is Yarrow. I'm super excited to have you. I'm really grateful for your patience because it's been a little while, and I'm really excited to share this conversation with Janelle Hardy, whom I've known for about a year, and which was incredibly beautiful. So I want to be really honest, I had a couple of really busy weeks, and so this is why this is coming late. And also when we recorded this, I was really tired. And yet it turned out really beautiful because Janelle just ran with my questions. She had so much beautiful stuff to share, and her tools just come together so beautifully to kind of really support intentions that I care about a ton. So we talked about weaving storytelling, bodywork, and visual art into transformative healing. We talked about her program around personal mythmaking, which is coming up in August, and I highly recommend that you check that out. We also talked about podcasting as a way to build community. I asked Janelle what embodiment means to her, and her answer was amazing. We talked about how we can unlearn body hate and restrictive movement patterns, and we shared some thoughts about emotional body awareness and many other things. So yeah, I really recommend you check Janelle out. She's amazing, and the links are all in the show notes. And yeah, I think that's almost all I have to say. As always, the podcast is sponsored by my Patreons. You can learn more and become a Patreon at patreon.com/daydreamingwolves. If you do become a Patreon, you'll receive a monthly ritual kit. There's always a different theme, and there's always different things in it, but there's always a tarot spread, a pep talk from me, a herbal recipe that's really easy to do, and then there are self-care practices and ritual ideas. The theme for August is going to be intuition, and I'm also adding a little PDF booklet with my favorite tarot spreads this time. You guys have asked about them a couple of times, and I wanted to kind of have them all in one place so I can share them with you. Yeah, I'm super excited to share that. Again, you can find out more at patreon.com/daydreamrose, and I'll also leave that link in the show notes. And if you have a minute, I would also really appreciate a review on iTunes. Thank you so much. Enjoy the episode and have a really beautiful day. Hey everyone, I have someone really beautiful on the show today. Janelle Hardy is with me. I've known her for over a year myself, and yeah, I'm just really excited to share this conversation because whenever we talk, really cool stuff comes out. We have a ton in common, and Janelle really cares about things that I love and talk about a lot on the show anyway, such as embodiment and creative expression, and finding ways of working with our own stories that are empowering and insightful and beautiful and intuitive. So yeah, I've met Janelle, I think over a year ago in a Facebook group, and we formed a mastermind with two other people and have been in it for maybe 9 months. I might be wrong, but I think that's kind of roughly how long it's been. And yeah, we're meeting regularly to talk about business and dreams and how we can make all of that happen. And it's a really beautiful way to have some group accountability. So I hope we'll dive a little bit more into that in the conversation. And then the other thing I want to say is that I also had a session with Janelle recently on creative unblocking and learned a really beautiful technique that I'm still applying and feel really grateful for. And I'm also taking one of her courses around anger. So it was really great to experience her work, not just as someone who's in a mastermind with her, but also as a client. And yeah, I just feel really blessed and honored that she's here, and I'm excited to talk. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Janelle, now to let us know who you are, where you are in the world, and what nature like is around you.
Hi. In the world right now, I am in a town called Vernon in the Okanagan Valley in BC, Canada. And to orient yourself geographically, it's about 450 kilometers northeast of Vancouver. And the land that I'm living on is the traditional territory of the Syilx people. Traditional and unceded territory. I'd like to add a lot of First Nations, Native American, Indigenous claims in colonized countries are truly stolen land and unceded. So Canada is still going through trying to untangle its deceitfulness in relation with a lot of First Nations. What else? I lost track of the other questions you had.
Sorry, it's a very long kind of 3-in-1 question. I was wondering if you can share a little bit about what nature is like around you right now.
Oh, okay. It's the middle of summer right now, where it's July that we're talking, and the Okanagan Valley is actually one of the hottest, driest places in Canada. And it's actually very well known for being a stunning wine growing and fruit growing region. And what that means is that there's trees and forests, but there's also an incredible amount of kind of rolling hills that are covered with this golden sagebrush and golden green grass. And then kind of cupped in most of the valleys are these stunning bright blue lakes. So I live very close to a lake called Kalamalka Lake, which was just voted the 10th most beautiful lake in the world. I'm not sure how they judged their criteria, but it is really beautiful. And then not that far away as well is Okanagan Lake, which is a really big lake, which in the summer times I grew up playing and swimming in because my dad's family lived down here, and we would make the 2-day drive from the Yukon Territory, the far north of Canada where I grew up, down here to a little town called Peachland. And the Okanagan Lake is known for having the Ogopogo monster.
Ooh, what's that?
Kind of like the Loch Ness monster.
Oh, cool.
But I've never seen the Ogopogo, and I don't know anyone who has. Oh, actually, no, I did have a conversation with a woman, not from here, who mentioned thinking she saw it when she was fishing on the lake years and years ago. Anyways, it's kind of some cool folklore.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are professionally, if that makes sense? I know that's a weird way of phrasing this question, but what do you do in the world, and what are you most excited about in your work?
Yeah, so I'm one of those people that finds everything fascinating, which can be a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it means I'm never really bored, but also it can sometimes feel pulled in too many directions. But having said that, now that I'm 39, almost 40, I think all these interests have really coalesced beautifully. So what I do in the world is transformational healing work. And I've spent most of my life being an artist. I've spent almost 12 years doing hands-on body work. It's called structural integration, which is also known as Rolfing, R-O-L-F. That's the more well-known version of what I do. And so these interests in creativity, in creating, in embodiment, in healing, and also in fairy tales and mythology and folklore have all kind of circled together into this work that I do online, which is transformational memoir writing. So I teach a 4-month e-course and writing circle called The Art of Personal Mythmaking, in which I guide you through a process of writing the first draft of your memoir with ease by examining your life story using themes and ancient tales such as fairy tales and embodiment prompts, in community with a circle of women and people that identify as women, to transform and heal basically stuck spots, grudges against yourself, or really hurt places in how we frame and understand our life and our life's path and life's journey, so that by the end of the 4 months, people kind of step out of the process with a lot of tools and skills to continue their healing journey, but also to understand themselves in more beautiful, more mythic ways.
Mm-hmm.
So that feels like my life's work, personal myth making.
Mm-hmm. That sounds incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm really, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I,
It's really fun.
yeah, I struggle to find the right words, but it's, yeah, I can tell from knowing you from the mastermind and from having experienced your work a little bit that this is a really beautiful experience. And I'm excited for anyone who gets to do it with you. Yeah. So that's happening once a year and it's live, is that right? And is that every year at the same time or is that a bit flexible?
Right now, I'm planning to keep offering it twice a year, actually, in
Mm-hmm.
August and February.
Mm-hmm.
It is live,
Mm-hmm.
so we do live video calls and the writing prompt circles, which is one of the richest experiences ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to describe it because it doesn't sound like writing together in a circle on a video call is particularly special, but it really is, especially the way that I facilitate it. So it has to be experienced to really be embodied and understood, but it's awesome. And yeah, so I run that. The next round is starting August 27th, and
Mm-hmm.
people get lifetime access. So this kind of circles around to my philosophy of healing, which is that we don't usually go through a process once and then we're done with it.
Mm-hmm.
Often what happens when we're working with themes in our life and the layers of our own selves is that it's really rich to be able to circle back into a process and be
Mm-hmm.
able to sort of spiral around the thing. And each time you spiral around, you're able to drop into that process in a different way or at a different layer. So although it is possible to really, really move through the 4-month process of
Mm-hmm.
personal myth making and come out with the rough draft of your memoir and have done every single thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's nice to have the space to be able to say, for example, just soak up the material that I share the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
The second time around, really focus on the writing, and so on and so forth. So I do actually have people that are circling back in for the second time,
Mm-hmm.
which is really exciting because I know they'll go even deeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. I feel the same. I think it's so easy to feel oversaturated with material, and it's really beautiful
Mm-hmm.
to be able to find your own pace with that, but at the same time have a little bit of really gentle accountability of it being live and there being a group and people that really want to show up for it. I think that's so helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, gentle accountability and people that want to show up for it. That's really key.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You also have a podcast that I would love to talk about. Can you tell us what that is about
Mm-hmm.
and what made you start it and how you're feeling with that at the moment?
Oh, yes. So everyone listening, Yarrow is a guest on my podcast, and it's not published at this moment, but will be
Mhm.
soon.
Great.
My podcast is called the Wild Elixir Podcast,
Hmm.
and it's a podcast for personal myth makers. I interview women, and I ask 4 specific questions, and the conversation unfolds from there. So the 4 questions, the first one is kind of a collection of questions. It's similar to what you're doing, Yarrow, which is to orient ourselves in place and space and find out whose traditional territory people are on. So I always ask, where are you in the world? Can you describe your surroundings and whose traditional territory you're on? Which just feels so good to do that. Then I ask, what's your favorite ancient tale? Meaning folklore, fairy tale, myth. A tale that is older than one generation, basically.
Hmm.
What's your relationship with your creativity and what's your relationship with your body like? And the conversations are so rich. They're so beautiful. It makes my heart sing to invite people onto the podcast and have these conversations. And the reason I started the podcast 2 years ago was that I felt like I was starving for conversations like this.
Hmm.
I really, you might have already got the sense from me talking about my work that those are my undying fascinations, right? The healing work I do is oriented around connecting to body creativity and using ancient tales and self-knowing, getting rooted into our bodies as our first home, our physical location as our second kind of grounded home, and then our spirit and soul and how we understand the world. So I just, it was a purely selfish decision. I really wanted to talk more about these things. And I had this feeling that if I wanted to have these conversations, probably other people did too. And even more people would be interested in hearing really deep, thoughtful, delightful conversations from other wonderful creatives and change makers and healers in the world. So I feel like it's working so far.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree. I think starting podcasts sometimes out of just really selfish desires to have the kinds of conversations that we want to have.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful, and I think that's true for most of the podcasts that I'm listening to at the moment and feel excited about. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I would also love to know a little bit more about what embodiment means to you. So it's such a beautiful yet kind of very broad and sometimes a bit vague concept. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about, how that's weaving into your work, what makes you feel alive, like how do you experience your own embodiment, and what is exciting and special in that at the moment.
Mm. Yeah, I might need reminders on all the questions, but they're so
Yeah,
good.
sorry. Yeah, let me
So
go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll start and then I'll get you to fill in the blanks. What is embodiment? What does that mean to me? So this answer is really specific to me growing up, and I'm assuming many of the listeners will have a similar experience, but growing up in a culture that is rooted in European colonialism and the schism that is more than 1,000 years old of um, considering ourselves as having separate units of being thinking minds and being bodies and having spirits and souls out there, but that also not being so important these days in our culture, and our body not being that important in our culture. And so this kind of schism, it comes out of a lot of different philosophies and cultural ways of life, of patriarchy, of a certain kind of Christianity, and a colonialist mentality of domination.
Mm-hmm.
And so what has happened, why so many people struggle with feeling connected to their bodies, is that we prioritize thinking as the highest form of knowing.
Mm.
Which means that if you're intellectualizing, if you're rationalizing, if you're in your head thinking and overthinking, that is prized, that is rewarded, that's valued, and that's how we're educated. If you orient more towards body as a child, and I mean, as children, we are just fluid beings fully inhabiting all parts of ourselves. So I wouldn't even say that some are more one way than the other. We're born into the world free and connected and oriented to our physical processes. So it's a learned experience of disembodying and disconnecting. And, there's many real reasons why people also dissociate to do with trauma. So I'm not trying to minimize that at all, but just setting the stage for the fact that by the time people are young adults, most of us are really stuck in our heads. Most of us, particularly girls and women, are oriented around trying to control and hate and loathe and despise our bodies, and orienting around a very narrow ideal of what physical female beauty is. And yeah, so I think I've set the depressing stage of getting stuck in our heads and disconnected from our bodies, but also actively hating our bodies in a lot of cases. Or if not hating, feeling like it's never good enough, never right, never correct. And so part of this also relates to patriarchy and these philosophical ideals of the feminine being connected to the body and the masculine being, and I know there's a much broader spectrum than just feminine and masculine, but in these philosophical ideals, it's kind of a binary idea of one thing or the other thing, and they can never overlap or cross. These are the underlying beliefs that we are raised in, and the feminine being connected with the body, being connected with Mother Earth, being less than, right? So these are often unspoken, and they're deeply embodied practices of being disembodied, which is kind of ironic. But so we get to this point where life doesn't feel so good usually. I mean, being stuck in your head is an awful shitty place to be.
Yeah.
And it's rewarded. So a lot of us, and you know, if I just speak from my own personal experience, a lot of clients that come to me are more women than men, and almost every single one struggles with this, but men do struggle with it the other way, of being trapped in their heads, thinking they have to control their bodies. There's just less kind of caustic beauty standards around having to look good in order to be allowed to be acceptable, right?
Yeah.
And so the reason that I think that it's so important, embodiment work is so important, is because most people have become so separated and distant from it, and our bodies are our only homes in the world. They are literally where our consciousness and our intelligence is housed. So our relationship to our bodies, I feel, should be exceptionally important because of that. That our bodies aren't, you know, just these vehicles for carrying our floating heads around. But our bodies are a repository for memory. They're a repository for wisdom. There's research about the gut-brain connection and how the guts are like a second brain. There are different ways of experiencing the world and tuning into our consciousness and a sense of being alive that we cannot tap into until we learn how to shed the layers of separation that we've learned. So, you know, it's like a learning process of becoming disembodied, and then a learning process, and this is where what I feel my job is, and a lot of healers and spiritual workers, depending on the spiritual work, but our job is then to teach people how to peel off the restrictions of physical holding patterns and mental holding patterns that are preventing us from feeling sensation in our body, from feeling experience through our body, from feeling joy by playing in our bodies, all these things, right? So I've gotten to that point and I've forgotten all the other details about embodiment. So you just asked me questions, Yarrow.
Yes, no, that was so beautiful. That was so much more than I had hoped for with that initial question, to be honest. So that's great. Maybe my next sub question would be, how is embodiment weaving into your work? I know that you're practicing different modalities, and I would love to see or hear a little bit. Sadly, we can't see, but to hear a
Mm-hmm.
bit about what that looks like in practice in your work.
Okay. So I think it helps to talk a bit about my own background.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up doing a lot of physical things. My parents had myself and my three siblings in the swim club.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also ran a karate club. So yeah, it's funny, up in the Yukon Territory in Canada, um, they ran the club. It was quite popular when I was a kid, and they were both black belts. My mom taught all the kids. My dad taught the teenager and adult classes with a couple other teachers from the club. And so us kids would be there, probably 3 or 4 nights a week when we
Mm-hmm.
were littler, not old enough that I could watch kids at home. And we used to just tear around with the other little kids, screaming and laughing. It was in an old school, which old schools have those big, beautiful gymnasiums with the high ceilings and
Yeah.
stages built in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which new schools don't really have. But the stage was where we would all play, and there were these huge, soft, puffy mats we would drag out and fling ourselves on. So we had a lot of joy being physical in our bodies. And then as we got older, we started training in karate, which I can't say that I loved, but I do have a solid background in martial arts. And then I really, really loved dance, and I wanted to take a ton of dance classes. There weren't a lot available. It was quite a small, remote town. And the other thing was my family was very poor for a long time. My parents had me when they were 18 and 21, and then 3 more children quickly after,
Mm-hmm.
and they had grown up in poverty as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they raised us beautifully. We were, I know we were really poor, but I don't recall feeling poor.
Mm-hmm.
But what it means was they couldn't afford the dance classes I wanted to take for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a teenager, I started getting into dance. So then I was doing a lot of dance. And then I was an exchange student in Japan, and I joined the Kendo Club, which is a very dramatic martial art. It's basically samurai fencing with bamboo swords.
Ooh.
Yeah. If you Google Kendo, Kendo, you'll see
Mm-hmm.
some stellar, super dramatic imagery. And it's kind of a painful martial art, because you are actually hitting each other with the bamboo swords, and
Wow.
there's protection, but it hurts if you do it wrong. And then from there, I just kept dancing, and I ended up actually getting my master's degree in dance. But despite all of this physical activity, so here's the difference: being physical does not mean you're being in your body. It doesn't mean you're embodied. It just means you're learning how to control your body well.
Mm-hmm.
And for
Yeah.
some, and for some people, they actually are able to be in their bodies while learning technique. But again, back to this kind of colonizer country with European roots, what happens in the learning process in these sorts of cultures is that things get broken down into units to teach. And so you don't, for example, when you're dancing, learn the full phrase as it's performed or danced to music at full speed. You don't actually get to see that and take that in and try it first. It's all broken down into tiny units and counted time, and then built up to the real-time expression. And what that really teaches is how to separate and control everything to do with your body, right? So and that's not how movement and dance and physical practices are taught in all cultures. I've taken a lot of African-based dance courses from a woman from Senegal, a woman from, it was Central Africa, was it? It might have been, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So when I lived in Montreal, I was really lucky to take courses from teachers rooted in their traditions in Africa. And what I learned was the teaching process was the opposite. You know, you break things down as well, but not before you talk about the connection to the music and you actually try the thing as it is. And it's a very different experience to learn how to move in your body that way. So circling back around to my work in embodiment and healing, I became a single mother when I was 23, and that was kind of like the final straw, dealing with chronic fatigue, becoming a single mother, going to school, and the stress I felt like such a mess. And of course, I was really strong, and my will was really forceful, and my mental capacities being considered really smart and bright. I was really in my head. So I thought I was perfectly fine, even though my body was saying, Janelle. But the depth of the stress I was experiencing and heartbreak as well led me into receiving bodywork. And so receiving the kind of bodywork that I actually do now is what started to kind of crack me open into understanding that I could feel more in my body than I thought I could. And that I had more potential for movement and sensation and things that in my head, I had made up stories about how, my back is just stiff and that's just how I'm built. That actually wasn't true. It was, my back was so stiff because I was holding so many intense feelings in my back. And I discovered this by receiving body work that helped to release the feelings, which was like a revelation of, those feelings, they're still in me. And now they're releasing, and wow, my back feels different. What's that about? So I started getting so curious, and my whole desire to dance and take dance was always oriented around how good it felt to dance freely. And so I always carried a bit of confusion. I really loved my dance classes, but I was also a little confused as to why the dancing process was so broken down into units and controlled, because all I just wanted to do was dance wildly. And I was always waiting to get through the technical foundations of the lessons in order for us to really let loose and express our movement. And we never really got to go there in the classes. So all this curiosity of little windows into intense joy and sensation that felt so good, rather than this angry, self-loathing, critical eye of looking at my body and never having it measure up. Those things got me curious. And I think it's important to note as well, with this beauty ideal of looking at our bodies and feeling like, I don't look as beautiful as the most beautiful girl on Instagram or in the magazines, is that until about 2 years ago, my body, I have always been considered very pretty, and my body has been very tall and slim, and I have embodied the Western white beauty ideal. And I still couldn't see it, because the whole point of this dynamic of body shame and body hate is that you never will feel like you're enough. Even if everyone tells you you're beautiful and look like a model, it will never be enough, because the internal dynamic is that it's still not good enough.
Yeah,
right?
So true.
And yet so many people, and myself as well, strive for this ideal, thinking that if we get there, we can relax and finally be good enough. And right now my body has changed quite a bit, and I've gotten a lot chubbier and softer, and it's a big transition. It's neither good nor bad, but it's a big transition for me in terms of how I feel in my body and how I look. And the deep irony is that I'm looking at pictures of myself from 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and what I'm thinking is, holy fuck, what a goddess. Like, I was gorgeous. But do you think that I thought those things when I was in that body? Not for 1 second, right? And this is a really shitty, deep tragedy that so many of us are so isolated from just inhabiting our bodies and feeling good enough, right? Because it's so much energy that gets diverted away from life purpose and joy and making our communities good into self-control and self-hate and self, in quotation mark, improvement, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm talking a lot, but so all of these dynamics, as I notice them in myself, then, I start noticing them in my clients. And so the body work that I've done for the last 12 years is a lot of, it's hands-on myofascial release, deep tissue work focused on releasing the fascia, which is so cool and amazing. Combined with movement lessons to give people the tools and skills in sitting, standing, and walking to, in their everyday life, bring themselves into alignment. And alignment is, good posture, but good posture is actually not what we think good posture is. Good posture, being good alignment, is just being balanced over our joints and in our bodies enough that we're in tune with the field of gravity and we're able to interact with this incredible force that holds us onto the earth in the ways our body was designed to. And when we bring ourselves into this state of alignment, and you can think of it energetically as well, because physical posture affects the alignment of the chakras, for example, and so on and so forth. When we bring ourselves into alignment, there's better flow. There's more ease. We start to experience not only ourselves in our bodies differently, but ourselves in the world and ourselves in relation and interaction with others differently. So I had a point to that. So supporting people also with the movement lessons, but also with the emotional body awareness, right? For example, my discovery that my stiff, tight upper back had to do with feelings I was stuffing in and holding on with an iron grip with those muscles, that there's a space and freedom to let that go too, tension in the jaw. Well, let's see what happens if we learn how to release that and speak more truly, or whatever it is. Everyone's dynamic is differently what they're holding into their body. So, and then I also have a bachelor's degree in anthropology, which is basically the study of culture, how culture shapes us, and how we interact as social units with each other culturally, and how, really culture is everything, and culture is so varied. But one of the ways that cultural transmission and values and learning happens is actually through ancient stories, through storytelling. So bringing in fairy tales, which I used to obsessively read when I was a kid, bringing in work with old stories is so fun and rich and amazing. And it also, speaking of embodiment, it's not that it embodies us directly, but when we heal and reconnect with our roots of who and where we come from, and this is important even when we want to push away or deny or feel ashamed of behavior of ancestors or cultural ancestors. It's probably even more important when we can come to terms with who and what we come from, we're able to drop down and root ourselves deeper in a sense of self that doesn't have to do with striving, it doesn't have to do with trying to become, but has to do with being and having a foundation of self-knowledge that also allows us to settle more into our body, right? Like, I really love how Clarissa Pinkola Estes, in her book Women Who Run with the Wolves, talks about her own physical body and how she describes herself in some ways as being like shorter and much broader and rounder than some of her friends that come from different backgrounds where they're typically long, tall, lean women. And she really honors her ancestors from whom that body type comes from, and reflects on how much her body type is who she is, and links her to the women in those ancestral lines who have similar bodies, and how this is a good thing. I just love how she writes about full acceptance of her body and the pride of the women on that line in how they look, and how it has nothing to do with the beauty ideal or the male gaze or being sexy, but everything to do with this is who we are, and this is who we come from, and this is why we look like we look. Yeah. So
yeah, that all makes sense. Thank you so much. I was just sitting here listening, kind of dropping into a really dreamy space of listening, and also kind of following on in my own head cinema, kind of illustrating what you were saying. And yeah, that was really great. Thank you. You were touching on your background and your education, and I know you have 3 different degrees, which I found really interesting and also relatable, because I'm also someone who just really, really loves learning, and ideally would love to be in education for the rest of my life, even though I have also really complicated feelings about academia and gatekeeping and the structures that are in place in institutionalized education. But anyway,
yeah, me too.
I would love to hear a little bit about your visual art experience and education, and how that is kind of weaving into the embodiment part together with movement practices.
Okay. So I'll just expand it to the creative arts. I'm a visual artist, definitely. I really enjoy painting and collaging. I've also been a dancer and choreographer, and writing is a big part of my artistic practice as well. And that, that sounds like, oh, I'm a dilettante. But it's not that I do all of those all at once, but I feel like when you've got a creative force or a drive to be creative, for some people it all just comes through the one medium. For other people, the medium suits the intent.
Yeah.
And so I find I'll go through phases where it's all about painting, and then it's all about movement and dancing and creating visual patterns for other people to witness. And then it's the writing. So I move through the mediums as it feels right for their creative expression. But in terms of training, I think we all learn from people and from styles, whether we want to admit it or not. So technically, you could kind of say that I'm a self-taught artist, because I've never done formal training. But it's actually not true that I'm self-taught, because everything I've learned has come from noticing what I like in other people's art, taking workshops here and there, and then doing the practice of it. So there's practicing making art by doing it, but there's also looking at art and taking workshops and learning from people that are a few steps ahead of you. in whatever way it is. And luckily, I think a lot of towns have community art centers, and even online now, there's a lot of fun little workshops you can access. So I feel like if I don't honor the creative drive and the spark towards making art, I'm a miserable human being. And I've learned that the hard way by trying to shut those impulses down and be practical and, get a job and be the responsible single mother who's just focused on paying the bills and raising her child. And again, this is a twisted up little idea we have in our cultures that somehow the creative is less valuable.
Yeah.
And when I make art in whatever way, when I'm paying attention to the world and I'm tuning in, and then I'm also making space for quiet, uninterrupted time where I can tap into that creative energy and make beauty, sometimes make messes, like learning is not necessarily a pretty process.
Yeah.
But play, right?
Yeah.
Messy play, everything feels better.
Yeah.
So that's why I make art, basically. I'm not sure if I really answered your question.
No, I think you did. And I wish everyone could see the painting that I usually see behind you when we're on calls, because it's really beautiful. So I would really recommend everyone to check your website out and to see if there's anything that can be seen there. I'm not totally sure. Are there any of your paintings on your website?
They're not up right now, but on Instagram, you can see all the portraits I did from the Style Like You project. I have a hashtag, which maybe I'll email you and you can share somehow. But if you find me on Instagram, it's Janelle Hardy Art. And you'll have to scroll down a bit, but you'll start to see these bright, colorful portraits of beautiful people at some point. And then if you click on one, you can click the hashtag, and there's about 80 of those portraits.
Oh, wow.
It was a 100-day project I did 2 years ago that I'm almost done.
Wow. Yeah. Who are all these people?
Okay, so have you ever heard of Style Like You?
No.
Oh my gosh, Yarrow, you're going to fall in love. You will never leave this rabbit hole. And everyone listening, they are, okay, I'm going to be a fangirl here.
Okay.
They're a mother-daughter duo in New York. The mother, I believe, was a fashion stylist in her younger years and is very slim and conventionally pretty. And then her daughter is tall and much curvier. So I believe, if I'm getting the story right, I would suggest going to the website and making sure, but they started this project called Style Like You 5 or 7 years ago when she was in her early 20s, the daughter, as a fun project, as a way to support the daughter moving through all the things I was just talking about, shame and self-hate and, not really feeling good in the body that you have. And so they started interviewing really stylish, interesting people. And it's turned into this whole movement. It's such a beautiful movement. So when I discovered them, they had started doing a video interview series called the What's Underneath Project. It's very...
Yes, I know that. Yes. But go ahead, tell us more. Yes.
Yeah, so the What's Underneath Project, they started inviting people to a very straightforward format. A wooden stool in front of a plain wall, they're behind the cameras, and the guest starts out sitting on the stool talking about their life. And slowly, as they talk, they take off items of their clothing until they're in their underwear. So the tagline is "True style lies in what's underneath." And it is one of the most beautiful and inspiring series. I think they've got close to 150 of these interviews now, and you can find them on YouTube. But I really recommend go through their website, get to know them, buy their book if it calls to you. They're doing incredible creative empowering work, and they invite such a wonderful range of diversity of body shapes and gender identities and people with different kinds of abilities and different backgrounds. Some are plus size models, and some are actors, and some are lawyers, but all of them have a really unique style, and it's so fascinating to see them start out in their style to slowly get down to their underwear. So then their style is in them being in their bodies and just being really real and honest. And so that a series has many times lifted my spirits when I've felt down on myself.
That sounds incredible. And I can tell already that some of my weekend is going to go that way.
And so almost 3 years ago, actually, I decided to it was 2 years ago. I had some extra time and I really wanted to get painting again. And I also wanted to get better at portraits. And I thought, I bet there's 100 of these interviews online by now. I'm going to check. And then I could just choose. My constraints were to choose an image that they shared on Instagram from the videos, to just choose the image that was most compelling to me. And as a series, it would look really beautiful because they had a consistency to their interview style. And so then I just, went through and screenshot the photos of the interview subjects and started painting. And then with each painting, I got to watch the video and be refreshed.
Yeah, I will definitely. I want to see both the videos and also your portraits. That sounds really amazing. And what a beautiful way to extend the project and work with that and just go for it. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. Before we say goodbye, I would love to know what you're currently offering. And you already touched a little bit on the Mythmaking course, but maybe you can recap that and also tell us what else you're offering and where people can find you.
Okay. So people can find me at my first name and last name.com. That's Janelle Hardy, and that's spelled JANELLEHARDY. Also Instagram, I enjoy sharing on Instagram, and you can click through my bio link, and that's Janelle Hardy Art. Right now, the thing that is most exciting me is offering the Art of Personal Mythmaking, which is my 4-month transformational and healing memoir writing course. And so we start August 27th. I've already got a small circle circling together. There's room for you. And so if you're interested, you click on the Personal Mythmaking tab. But basically, we just work through different themes each week. It's been described as life-changing, offering a reframe on your life story. One woman said that it helped her remove some chips on her shoulder that she had thought she was just going to live with for the rest of her life. And helped her tap into a sense of vitality and joy once those chips shifted. I really get nerdy about curating the weekly themes and sharing really diverse, interesting ways to look at the subject matter. So that excites me. And I try to offer a little bit of video, a little bit of audio, a little bit of visual. I usually create some pretty awesome Pinterest boards to spark creativity, and a lot of embodiment prompts. So the one thing I didn't really touch on, which is kind of crucial to the healing work that I do, is that creativity and creative block is really pervasive and common. And it's actually one of the easiest ways to shift that is to start tapping into our bodies. So embodiment work is also creative unblocking and healing work, which is really exciting because it's so much more easeful than our typical ideas of how to unblock ourselves. When we start tapping into our body, it's almost like it's deceptively simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is,
Yeah.
it's a nice paradigm to step into.
Yeah.
So that's my biggest work right now. That's what I really want to invite people into. I will happily offer to anyone listening who decides to sign up 2 free half-hour one-on-one sessions with me. If you sign up and just tell me that you heard about it through Yarrow's podcast. Those 2 little freebies are yours.
Thank you so much. That's really generous. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I also really love one-on-one work, and so I do one-on-one work as well. That's available on the website. And then in development is a little bit of a higher end intensive private retreat offering involving sleeping on the wild Pacific Ocean beach of Vancouver Island, or on my mother's property on the banks of the Yukon River in the Yukon Territory in Canada. So, that's also available. But
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, so that's more like an intensive container of a process, rather than committing to 20 one-on-one sessions. They get dropped into the container of a weekend. Yeah. And I think that's it.
Yeah, we'll add the links to the show notes as well. So if people weren't able to take a note right now, don't worry. They'll be in the show notes there as well. And yeah, thank you so much, Dana. Thank you for everything that you shared. I want to admit to everyone I was quite tired today, and I feel like I just gave you a couple of questions and you ran with them so beautifully. I was just leaning back going, oh yes, that is exactly what I needed to hear today, and I'm so excited to share that. So thank you so much for making my job so easy.
My pleasure. Talk, talk, talk. You can rest.
No, that was really great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on here. I love what you do too. So
thank you. See you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you enjoyed the show, and if you did, I would really appreciate a review on iTunes. That's making it a lot easier for other people to find the show, and they might benefit from it too, and it's just beautiful to share these conversations with as many people as possible. If you want to support the show financially, you can also become a Patreon at patreon.com/daydreamers, which gets you access to monthly ritual kits as well as courses and regular readings by me. I will link to that in the show notes. Thank you so much.